everybody. Welcome back to Lights of Recovery. I'm Jessica Miller, your host. I'm also the editorial director of addictionhelp.com. No big deal. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about substance abuse. And this is something that I think is really important to discuss because so often I feel like now that I've been working in the recovery field for a little while, I've noticed that there's so much that's tailored to people who had pretty severe addictions. And while that's wonderful because those people absolutely deserve help and love and support, there's a lot of us out here, myself included, honestly, that may not qualify as being an addict necessarily, or may not even be what you would think of when you think of addiction or an addict. And yet we're out here, we're struggling with substance abuse. We're using substances maybe for the wrong reasons. And like some of us find our way out and there's not a lot of support, I feel like, and not a lot of conversation around that, especially with things like alcohol, which, you know, in our society, it's like, it's the popular thing to do. It's almost bizarre if you're not a drinker. So anyway, on that note, I recently put out a thing on Facebook because, you know, this is a new show. And I want to talk to anybody and everybody. And I got real lucky with Ashley from last episode where we just happened to meet in a Facebook group, but that was kind of lightning in a bottle, honestly. So I put it out to my friends, you know, who does anybody want to come talk about your experiences? Because like, in my opinion, everybody's got a story at some point with this. And so my amazing friend Jess reached out and was like, girl, yes, we need to chat. And so this is a little bit of a catch up for us too, because I don't actually know this full story. I have a vague sense of it. So may I please introduce the lovely Jessica Foutz, or do you prefer
Hello.
Jess or Jessica or Jessie, honestly?
Well, okay. So Jessie is an endearing term that my family and my besties call me.
Right.
So you always can call me Jessie, but I actually
Yay.
prefer Jessica over
Okay.
Jess.
That's
You're
right.
Jess.
So Jessica and I
We've been
worked
down this
together.
before.
Honestly. So we worked together. We're not naming any names or companies or whatever. We worked together for a time. I was her assistant. And because we both had the same name, they were like, well, one of you's got to change and you're the new one. So you get to be Jess now. And it was Jessica, her. And what's really funny is now, as life has gone on, I almost never introduce myself as Jessica unless it's like in a professional setting. But people call me Jess all the time. And honestly, like I even said it at the beginning of this podcast. Why did I say Jessica? Because honestly, I'm Jess at this point.
Definitely.
Anyway, so I'm super excited to talk to you about your story because I know we have been friends for a lot of years at this point.
You know, actually, look, we're about to be, it's been at least a decade.
Right.
At least.
And
maybe
so
a little
many
more than that.
I know. And like, it's so many iterations of ourselves, you know, different job changes, relationships come and gone. You're a mom now. Like it's pretty awesome, honestly, being able to look at somebody and see so many different versions of them. So
It's
with
wild.
that said, take me back to the dark times.
What dark time?
I know, like you said before we started, because we were chit-chatting, you know, sorry, audience, like you don't get to see everything, but we were chit-chatting and Jessica was saying, you know, she like, I know why I was drinking. And I was like, save it. Don't tell me yet. So let's get into it. Now is the time.
So, okay. I'm going to kind of piece this away. So I had started drinking on a regular basis by the time I was 16.
Wow. Okay.
So after school, I drink before school sometimes. When I was say 13, 14, there was no doubt in my mind that I wanted to do a lot of drugs.
Wow.
I wanted to do them. I wanted to know what they were like. I didn't know why, but I knew that I wanted to do them. And so drinking became something that I was used to doing. And
okay.
I drank.
Was it like like a family thing potentially too? Like, did not that you came from a family of drinkers, but I know some families, it's just very common. They'd have wine with dinner and the
Everybody
holidays, and
drank.
it's just right. Okay.
Everybody
Okay.
drank. Now, my grandparents on both sides, full-blown alcoholics.
Okay.
My
Wow.
grandfather died in detox.
Oh,
So the other, it's riddled throughout my family, right? So my parents, they didn't beat their kids,
right.
right? You know what I'm saying? So like
Yep.
things were okay because you didn't beat them because you were drinking, but they were definitely drinking, and it's indoctrinated into our society. You
Yep.
have a drink at brunch, you have this or that, but the point
Right.
is by the
You want to hang out with your friends, and it's like, well, what are you guys going to go do? You either get dinner or you get drinks.
or you drink.
It's just,
So
it's such a thing. Yep.
it became indoctrinated into a lifestyle. I worked at a restaurant, I was a partier. But when I turned 19, I was exhibiting severe PTSD problems.
Really?
Severe. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't do a lot of things, and it kept me from things. Like I was accepted to go to a school down south in South Florida to their marine biology department. And I couldn't leave. I was too terrified to leave anyone who was safe for me. And during these
Wow.
times, alcohol was something I could lean on because it took away these PTSD feelings, which, by the way, I had no idea were post-traumatic stress syndrome at this time.
Right.
And nobody around in my circle was going to go, yeah, by the way, there's a few things that maybe want to add to that, and could have gave me a small warning. So I was
So you're floating along, doing your thing, self-medicating without realizing that's what you're doing.
navigating through, and I was having major issues.
So what kind of issues? Like, if you don't mind my asking, what were some of the
Well, I was,
symptoms that were coming up for you?
oh goodness, anything associated with PTSD. So I would be too terrified of anything. I was so scared of dying every second. I couldn't sleep. I thought it got so bad that when your brain starts to shut off when you're actually falling asleep, which is ironic now because now I believe we actually do disconnect, but for a totally different reason. I would think I was dying. I would literally think I was dying, so I would stay awake.
So that losing consciousness becomes terrifying.
Just when I was dying, I was in such a full state of panic from the moment I woke up until I went to bed. I was doing anything to make myself feel better or to feel calm. My family, my old man worked for Big Pharma and did up until he retired. So I was living in a situation where medication was unacceptable.
So it really, because you would almost
100%.
think maybe it would be the other way around. So he was in it and he knew the way that,
like, you are weak if you take medication.
Terrible.
You're weak.
Wow.
You're weak. And also anything like being addicted, that's unacceptable behavior. I didn't have it in me to be an addict. It was too frowned upon. Does that make sense? Like as far as that was the world that I was living in, like you're better than this,
Right. So you're not even going to consider it.
Exactly. It was really focused on putting the problem on your life is good. You have nothing to be worried about. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? Instead of what happened to me.
Right.
Right. So I got really good at pretending. And at one point, when the symptoms were so bad, I was terrified to drink alcohol. So I actually didn't for about 3 months. So I was so scared.
Wow.
I was too terrified of just existing. I was afraid everything was going to kill me. It's wild. I have so many stories. I can't get into all of them. But it would, I would be tucked inside of a corner for hours, in between. I would get disassociated all the time.
Where was this in relation to when I met you? Because I would never have guessed.
So when you met me, it was at a very interesting time. It was the first time I got medicated. I had finally, and it wasn't, I had been told, no. I was terrified of taking medication. I finally got put in front of somebody that was like, look, this is not right. You have to go get help. And I did. And I did it. And I was terrified the whole time. And it did offer me relief. And I was ecstatic about it. But all it did was take away the anxiety so I could party more, because I hadn't had that in so long. I had been living with this suffering. My soul was on fire, basically. I couldn't do it. Like, the drinking would quiet it so I could function, so I could work, so I could be in any kind of a setting. So let's see, where am I? So when I met you, I had just started taking a medication, and it was buying me relief, but that only lasted for a very short time. It came back. Trauma is always desperately trying.
Yes, it is.
To raise it is trying to raise itself up.
You cannot bury it.
You cannot bury it.
And when you can put a bunch of stuff on it, but it is going to climb its way back out.
And twice as hard, twice as fast, all that stuff.
Right.
So, really the reality is, by the time I was 5 years old, the damage was done.
Yep.
So I was living in this world of toxic stress, and what I learned is that little kids, their brain chemistry gets literally rewired, and their uptick of, like, let's say this is normal adrenaline. Well, you have to uptick it a little bit so you can feel things. So my behavior as an adolescent, I was always doing crazy stuff, push the limit, feel exhilaration so I could feel something.
Right, because your baseline had been so elevated.
So I could feel something. Wow. So that kind of explained a lot of my, like, crazy behavior. I would drink a lot. It was just a symptom of something else. And
So when did it turn on you? When you started going, like, okay, I mean, you got help for a little bit for the medication, but then you went back to partying, because at least, you had this, like, monster away for a while, so you could kind of go enjoy yourself, but you then kind of went nuts.
Didn't deal with anything. I didn't deal with anything.
Right. So it was like kind of trapped in a closet, and I'm going to go crazy and have a good time. But then
finding this little cocktail of stuff I can take to keep me moving forward.
Right.
So I had to work.
Right. That is how we met.
Right. I had to, like, do all these things, and I did them, but I was suffering miserably. My soul was on fire, and I was so miserable for so long. And I was in trouble, sober. So when I'm having things like blackout rage sober, let's just mix some alcohol with that and see what happens.
Oof.
It's not good.
Right.
It's not good. So, it might quiet the rage. What did it for me is that I was losing my grip on keeping the rage monster in, accompanied by having flashbacks. So wow. I kind of knew these flashbacks were coming because I was much more educated at this point, and I had been told I'd already been diagnosed with PTSD, and I was in real trouble then, because I was timing the drinking. But at this point, I had a little boy. So you can't be out drinking and stuff like that. That's not going to work. So I'm taking a bottle out of the fridge because it's the only thing that is keeping these flashbacks at bay so I can raise this baby. Now, I'm not getting blackout drunk. I'm not, like, getting passed out. But I was well aware of what I was doing my whole life.
You were self-medicating with alcohol.
I'm self-medicating to drink to keep this monster at bay. And it just did not work. So it took that realization that, where's T Swizzle when we need her? I'm the problem.
I love that song, though.
I'm it. I kept starting to realize that I was having these patterns, and I was going to hurt someone. I was going to hurt somebody. And then whose fault is that? What, someone triggered me? Somebody said something to me and I go hurt them with a baseball bat? Or I want to go down to my neighbor's house and slit his throat while he's sleeping? Like, these are thoughts I'm having. This is stuff I'm dealing with. And
Right.
yeah,
That's very intense.
I go
That's
do
very
those
intense.
things. Yeah, what happens when I take the baseball bat to my husband?
Right.
Whose fault is that?
Right.
That's my fault. So it just became a realization that, now, mind you, neither of those things happened.
Yes.
No.
For clarity's sake, internet. Don't freak out.
um, I was like, someone's going to take my son from me. And I was also hurting myself. I was totally sober and I broke my hand.
What? I didn't know this.
That was like when I first started getting sober, because the rage was so much that I don't know how, I didn't have those tools yet. But what do? I slam my fist into stuff, so I break my hand, but I'm punching something that doesn't move.
Right.
You know, it's the same thing. I broke my foot, same way.
Which is weirdly, and this is going to get a little cheesy for a minute, so, forgive me. But the way you said that, punching something that doesn't move. And I kind of feel like I can relate in the sense of, when you're running from your trauma and whether you recognize that's what it is or not, and you're just trying to cover it in, getting messed up, essentially. For me, it was kratom and booze. Like, it's literally punching something that doesn't move, because the trauma is not going anywhere. It is not moving. And you can keep hitting it with, doing whatever you do to numb yourself, but it's like, it's not going anywhere until
No,
you
it's not.
change something. You got to do the work, and it sucks and it's hard and it's, but it's so worth it. So if you're listening, it's so worth it.
Oh my God. It was amazing. So
what changed then?
So I got myself, I had a couple of episodes where I was drinking too much and I was getting like rage happy. So that was there were like several other things that had been happening, but I was like, I had known that I had never truly put any effort into really not drinking. I have never just fully up and quit drinking. And I only had I had a lot to prove to myself at that point, because
I like that you were proving something to yourself.
100%.
You don't always hear that, but I like that.
I didn't want to be I wanted to be, okay, drinking didn't do anything but hold me back from becoming this embodiment of the woman I knew that I was. And that included being this mother to her son, who doesn't have to have a drink, because I saw those people walking around and I wanted to be them. In fact, I openly hated on them because I wanted that so bad. How could she just do that? Yeah, I would see things and people like, I'd have 4 or 5 drinks, they'd have 1. And I hated drinking. For so many years, I didn't want to drink.
I can relate to that.
I didn't have any other way to
know what you're talking about.
I didn't think that I would ever go through life without drinking. I had accepted this half life that I was going to have, and I was just going to be a drinker like everybody else was in my family.
So how long's it been now?
It's been a little over 2 years.
Are you serious, dude?
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. It's been a little over 2 years. I will tell you that so the recovery side of it, right? So when I first decided to quit, I was having major PTSD. So there were a lot of extra things that were like happening there. But my husband, and he wasn't my husband yet, he was going down hard. He was not supportive that I wasn't drinking, because he has his own demons, right? So that meant he had to quit drinking. If I was going to quit drinking, that was just going to amplify how much he was drinking, because it's in your face now all of a sudden. So he was going down hard. So my situation at home was not easy.
Sure.
I was having panic attacks all day. I did use Xanax to help me with that. And it wasn't until about 6 months of sobriety that I finally started to make real headway. And I truly confronted and found the flashback became clear. And I was actually able to see into my past and have a realization about what I was running from.
So the
And
demons basically made themselves known.
I basically, I found Pandora's box. I found it. And I opened it up. And then I had to reevaluate, which means I needed like a backpack and like a flashlight and like a Uzi. Like, I didn't go in there and figure out what was going on. That is, at first I lost a lot of weight. I didn't feel physically sick, which was good. But the true magic happened after months of sobriety. One thing that you asked me about what made me do it is I realized that I was never enough. I didn't know how to love myself. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that looked like. But my son was. I knew how to love him. He was enough. So if I could just follow that, I could make something happen. And it did. I kept working and I found all of the answers. And that's when the real work started to happen. That's when I really had to go in and look at those demons and find forgiveness and not touch a drink through any of this. Because it wasn't.
Did you work with a therapist as well? Or were you just kind of doing individual work?
I did individual work. So I did something kind of called the completion process, which is something that I followed that helped me greatly. So I did a lot of just sort of work. I educated myself a lot. I did a lot of practices.
Excellent.
But when I reached this moment in life, I actually was a little concerned at first that I thought I was manic because I was so euphoric inside. I felt like once I had reached this point that I felt like I had like survived 1,000 deaths. I had a second chance at life. I felt reborn again inside my soul. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and I'd run around the neighborhood crying tears of joy. Good thing nobody came outside because the neighbors.
I know what you're talking about, though, man. Like,
it was euphoric. It was like I got to experience life, and I didn't have this overwhelming feel of death knocking at my door every single waking moment. And I didn't have to drink a drink. I didn't have to do anything. Did it feel
like colors were better and
everything.
Like food tasted better and just?
I think I was on drugs.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
I got to experience the world. Every emotion came out of me. I cried and cried and cried because I had been numb my whole life. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. How do you deal with what you can't remember yet? And more importantly,
but that's still hurting you.
That's still hurting. And what happens when you're addicted to suffering? Because that's what I was.
More on that, please. Okay, go on.
You're addicted to suffering because it's been indoctrinated into my life.
How? How do you mean that? Or what do you mean by that?
It was like it became, without knowing it, it became such a part of my everyday life since I was little. I didn't know anything outside of it.
Right. So that was your baseline. That was normal. If it didn't feel chaotic, it didn't feel right.
Exactly. And chaotic shit happened all the time. Things were constantly going crazy was happening. That was me attracting all of that because my soul was on fire.
Right. You've said that a couple of times, and I think that's a really good...
You were the person, you, of all people...
Me?
Probably back in 2013 or 2014, you were the first person who ever sent me that meme of the dog sitting at the bar that's on fire. And I'm like, this is not fail.
Literally with the coffee cup, like, this is fine.
And you were making a joke about work. And I was like, that's me. That's me not at work. That's me at home. That's me in the shower. That's me in my dreams. I would have night terrors.
I had no idea. Just to, to let people know. And then this is what I think makes this interview kind of unique and fun and special is because I know you and I've seen so many like iterations of you, like we talked about earlier. And, it really just goes to show how powerful masking can be, unfortunately, that you can have somebody right next to you suffering as immensely as you were and not really know. And it's, not to shit on me or anything to say like I was a bad friend, hopefully, but like people often we can still hide these things from loved ones, and
of course.
and they have no idea. And so I just want anybody listening who has a loved one that has, suffered through any form of addiction or substance abuse, maybe you're beating yourself up about it because you're like, how could I not have known? How did I not see? It's really not always that obvious. And everything, you were listening to Jessica talking about this, and like, I think only because working in this field for so long do I not feel that sense of immense guilt of like, gosh, how could I not notice? Because I know that people are really good at masking it. I was really good at hiding it. When I told people about the kratom thing, a lot of people were like, what? I had no idea you were back into that. Or that, I just told my uncle recently, I was either drinking hungover or drunk during 2020 and most of 2021 and maybe half of 2021, I guess. And he had no idea, like no clue. And that's the way it is, right? Like we hide it because we also don't want to burden our loved ones with our demons.
There are a lot of people who don't know this, but I hid things that I wasn't okay because that's how I felt I got love. So if you're living in an environment where things are not okay, but it's not okay to say that, you hide it. And then that just becomes a part of who you are.
Right, because you're so strong and tough. I can handle
it gets
anything.
Disguised as being tough. I was a tomboy. I was tough. My parents were tough. Yeah, it was cool. It was edgy. I was traumatized. And I was walking around not feeling anything. To give you an example of how...
Yes, please.
Significant this was. This is... Okay. When I was 11, I was in the car with my parents and we were driving home. And we struck a woman, a pedestrian, who was walking across the street. And we killed her. My parents pulled over on the side of the road and they jumped out of the car. And I sat there and I watched everything.
Wow.
And I remember feeling like it's not okay that I'm not sad because I felt excited. Because it's chaos. There's lights, there's trauma. It's recognizable. This is something I'm used to. I'm addicted to this suffering. It's familiar.
Wow.
I was 11. So then my parents are, she's okay, this and that. But at that point, I knew I couldn't tell them I wasn't okay or that I had those thoughts. I can remember all sorts of times throughout my life that would be a big, that just goes to show that the damage was already done.
What would have happened, do you think, if you had said, like, hey, I'm not okay?
I don't think
looking at it now,
different. I don't think a whole lot different would have changed.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think my parents would have probably put me in therapy or anything like that. No, I don't foresee that. I would like to think that would have happened, but I don't think so.
So how do you think your experience has changed how you are a parent with your
son? Oh my goodness. Well, the fact that it allowed me to see my life at his age, it has stopped me. I've stopped the cycle. So I am not projecting unknowingly all of this pain and how I'm dealing with situations through my son, which happens, intergenerational trauma. So I have put the brakes on that. So that is one way.
That's amazing. I was just talking to my therapist about that, actually, that being a cycle breaker is exhausting.
Absolutely.
It's exhausting. It's hard.
I will tell you, Jess, there are moments that are utterly beautiful because not only am I healing, when I watch my son do these certain things and realize the life that he has and what he's not going through, it brings me so much joy. And then I am also at a healing place where I forgive things in my past, right? So I'm not only healing, but like my mom is healing too. Because I get to watch her not only be a good mom to me, she's being an amazing grandmother to her grandson, and she's healing too.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it's beautiful to feel. And I couldn't have had any of that with the alcohol. I couldn't have had any of it. I would have never have gotten to this place. It would have kept everything numb. I would have never figured anything out. And not to mention, it's a poison.
It literally is, though. It's actually poison.
Your body is like, oh, fuck this. Let's get rid of this immediately. Trying to get rid of it. And we're like, no, but there's a football game, or there's brunch, or there's all this stuff that really doesn't matter. Like,
yes, there's always a reason.
There's always a reason. I have so much fun now going to like a place to meet people and to not drink.
Isn't it fun,
though? Fun being hungover.
Right?
I'll be here. Dude. It's going to be great. I don't have to deal with that anymore. I don't have to think about it. I love it.
How has it? So you did mention your husband, early on, it was a challenge for you guys. So how is it now? Because I suspect it's very different now.
Much different. He has his own reasons for drinking. And we were professional drinkers. So he thanks me all the time because I'm the reason that made that. I basically put one foot down and one foot up his ass. I was just hopping in a circle.
I love that.
We were making it happen.
So does he not drink at all anymore either?
So he'll drink.
Okay. That's like me once in a while.
It doesn't, yes. And like, now when we got married in Italy, I absolutely had Italian wine. But I wasn't, it was so different.
It was for a different reason, right?
It was so different. It was very, very different. There was no getting drunk. It was to drink the Italian wine. And it was a magical experience because my relationship with alcohol was so vastly different.
That's the key right there. Mm-hmm. That's it.
I don't have these feelings because I think I lived so many years in so much pain with so much suffering. And I hated the alcohol for so long that I was so ready. I was so ready. People always say you got to be ready.
Yes, you're right.
I was right. I already lost one marriage,
Yeah.
It wasn't from
Do you think
alcohol.
That played into that at all?
Oh, I don't. I do think alcohol played into our chaotic lives. Absolutely.
That's fair.
But it was more like...
Without getting into it, like I know that there's a lot more to that story.
Of course. But
sounds like to your point, like,
I had spent 20 something years drinking full time. Let's try it just not this time for the next 20 years.
Let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens here. I have been in the best shape of my life. I've been going to yoga. I try and go 3 days a week. I got a 6-pack now. That baby came back. I feel all hot and 40. I meditate. I can sleep now. Like I wake up and don't get me wrong. I still deal with PTSD and I still have my problems and I still have those moments.
So what do you do now to kind of manage those? What has worked personally for you?
Meditation has been the hardest thing to. It was hard initially because it was so hard to get me to sit still. It really was. There's so much happening inside. But once I was able to start doing it, like while I had a panic attack or like while I was in it, and then I started to be like, oh, I feel a little better.
Right.
So I would do it again. And then I would do it again. And so I started finding resources online and things, certain gurus and things like that, that I really liked. And I would listen to them a lot and I would try and do the work. I started doing the work about like getting in when I'm having these episodes. Okay, let me get into a meditation that is kind of geared towards this and see where it takes me. The completion process helped me a lot.
So what is that? Because I've never heard of that.
The completion process is a book guideline that something a woman by the name of Teal Swan put out, and it's kind of a controversial figure. But it is all about when you have those moments of trauma, going in and walking around in your memories and sort of meeting yourself again and processing all of that. So there's a lot of childhood trauma stuff that goes on in there and like really processing all that stuff.
Interesting.
So
a lot of visualization techniques.
A lot of visualization stuff. because I had sort of found the key. I found this key and I felt such a sense of euphoria and safety. I knew that I was going to be okay. I knew I was going to be all right. And if I could just keep going, and I could only control myself, keep going. I had so much to learn and I had so many answers to find. And I learned so much about myself, and it completely refocused my entire life as far as like what I'm passionate about and how now I want to help people. That's all I want to do is help people. I'm not too sure how I'm going to do it yet. Maybe this is where we start.
I mean, honestly, this is a great start, really.
I just want to
Because,
start
like,
somewhere.
that's the goal.
Yeah, to help. And if for anyone, for so long, if I had a superpower, the thing that I wish that I could do was that I could just touch your arm and you could feel all that rage inside of me, so you know I wasn't crazy.
Wow.
I just wanted somebody to know. You know, there was a time I couldn't even, like, if you mentioned the word suicide or anything like that, it got to the point that I couldn't hear the word. I couldn't be around a conversation. I couldn't see it on TV. I go into a complete panic attack, a complete meltdown. Why? Why would that happen?
Is that related to the trauma?
So I learned, I learned this through this process. It clicked because I was so terrified of suicide. I was so anxious about that. I was going to be so anxious that the anxiety was going to make me commit suicide. That's not how that works.
No.
But I was convinced. And I would go months, I went years like this. And I would do anything I could to avoid it. It turned out.
What a sense of like not having control of your own self, you know? Like,
no idea. Oh, my mind and I were at odds at all. Oh, I constantly get lost in thoughts. If I got a song stuck in my head, that'd be months of debilitating distress. So I thought I was going crazy. I wanted so badly to be locked up in a mental institution, but it was frowned upon.
Right.
But
do you think that would have helped you?
Yes, because I would have had real people helping me instead of me trying to figure it out on my own, because my parents weren't helping me. They didn't know how. Right. They didn't know how. They prayed that I was just too little to remember. But when I was little, there was an incident in my home. My brother was being abused severely, and there was an incident in my home where he was going to kill himself. And this would get screamed, and he was terrified for his life. He also was afraid he was going to get killed. So this is like an 8-year-old little kid who's sleeping with a knife under his pillow, right? Or a 9-year-old kid. And so he's going to kill the whole family, or he's going to commit suicide. And I was real little when that was happening.
Right. And your brain stores that information.
So when I got to that memory and I was like, oh, this is what now educated me. It's like, oh my gosh, that's why. Doesn't make it okay, but I understand now. I understand why it did what it did. And then if I could understand that, what else is happening? What else is out there? So it's really just been on this amazing journey of self-discovery. And let me tell you, I've never looked sexier.
You do look fantastic. You have such a glow.
But you can see it on me, or people have loved it a long time.
Honestly, way to take it from like that very serious and intense moment of memory to like, but also I'm so attractive. That's what I love though. We have a very similar sense of humor where you've got to look at the horror in the face, and sometimes you just have to laugh, because otherwise what's the point? It's you gotta, you know,
to laugh about it. Like,
sometimes
that is like a soothing mechanism to use humor.
Yeah.
My parents, it was it was a running joke in my house about me humping the furniture.
What?
I'm like, then I get older and educated. I'm like, 3-year-olds aren't supposed to be humping furniture. You do know what that means, right? Everyone just wants to laugh about this at Thanksgiving dinner. Like, oh, hey, not in front of company, Jessica. Can you keep it in the back? Like, this is kind of...
But that implies clearly something else was going on or had happened
there
to
was
you.
several things going on, but this implies how let's use humor to disguise a horrible thing.
That's a good point too. It's a coping mechanism, but
it is a coping mechanism. So
but it can also be a mask. And you're right. Right.
It can be. So there's sometimes, but no, humor is great for you. So it's a journey, and anybody who is like, if you are having trouble and issues, like drinking is a symptom. Over drinking is a symptom most of the time of something else.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, having a good time can't always be it's not. And it's also boring.
So life now is way more exciting and in a good way.
For me, my life is more boring now, but I'm excited because
boring is nice, isn't it?
Oh, I love it. Everything's all calm and quiet. There's no chaos. There's no drunken just mayhem. My son is thriving. He's living in a world where he doesn't have to worry about those things. He's living in a world where he gets to be happy or he gets to be sad. And that's okay.
I love that. And I love that your focus is not just on, he lives in a world that, he's happy, because I could see, some people maybe coming through trauma and then it's only love and light, right? It's only like, he's happy. Everything's happy. I've made a happy, perfect environment for him where he'll never be sad and, whatever. But that's not life. That's not realistic. And I'm so glad to hear someone say, no, he is free to experience all of the emotions there are in a safe environment.
Yes.
That's so huge and so
absolutely important. Not. There was no crying in my household at all. Right. In fact, my mother told me a story one time. She was like, I'm really proud of you for going to therapy. This is actually with my first husband. And she was like, I'm very proud of you for doing this. I want to tell you something. I really wish I would have done this with your dad. If so, I think we would probably have still been married. She said they had gotten into an argument and she got really upset and she started to cry. And that he got angry with her and basically told her, if you think crying is going to solve anything, you got anything coming, something along those lines. And she's like, so I didn't. And I'm like, okay, well, when did that happen? I'm like trying to think in my mind, like when things were rocky. She's like, I don't know, before we got married. I'm like, wow. Okay, so this is why I've never seen my mother cry. I've never seen my father cry. I wasn't allowed to cry.
Do you cry now?
Oh my God, yes.
It's so nice.
Sometimes I'll cry in a commercial. I'm like, this is what real people do. The Publix commercials, they work now. I'm like, yes, I can feel things. Yes.
They're so good. The Hallmark commercials.
But there's such a release in it now that I know it's okay.
A good one.
And it feels good that I can cry when I'm happy and I can cry when I'm sad and I can cry when things are funny, and like I'm not so shamed for it. I never identified with shame until now. I never thought I was ashamed. So much shame.
So what would you say? What has been the most unexpected positive out of all this? Because I'm sure there's some obvious ones, the motherhood and your relationship and your health, but what has been the most unexpected joy or bonus or outcome from this, if you can think of anything?
I think the unexpected one would be connecting to source.
Really?
I didn't expect it. I didn't know. I've been so numbed out. I couldn't feel anything. That is something I didn't expect to happen, is that my spiritual side would open up in a way that it did. What else did I not expect to happen?
I want to touch on that real quick, though, because I think that's really lovely. And it actually connects back to the conversation that I had with Ashley in the last episode, where she had a very similar experience. And, spirituality is deeply personal. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
I encourage, anybody that's on here, I want them to talk about it and I want them to feel comfortable, regardless of what my personal beliefs are. I want them to feel comfortable to talk about theirs. And I I feel like that is such a common thread, whether you are religious, non-religious, just feeling that there's something bigger than me, and there's almost a magic to existing.
Oh,
There's
I
something
didn't expect to have
profound.
a sense of purpose.
Oh, really?
Like now I have a sense of purpose. Like I want to go help people. Like now I understand what my role is.
I feel like we talked about that years
We
ago,
did.
hilariously sitting at the bar, being like, yeah, I just don't know what I want to do with my life, but I'll figure it out eventually, and we'd laugh, ha ha ha, whatever. Cause I was so at the time gung ho that I was going to be a teacher. And we would talk
God, I
about that.
forgot about that.
Remember? Yeah. And you'd be like, wow, I wish I
Dude.
had something that I was that driven to do. And I would get that a lot from people. And it's funny because then I did it and was 6 weeks in and went, this is not for
Not
me.
for me.
I really want to help people, but not like this. Not blindfolded and with my hands tied with red tape.
Oh my
So,
God.
yeah, scathing indictment of public school, but that's another podcast episode.
Oh my God, I know.
But that makes me really happy to hear from you.
It was something because I feel like I had a very unique, special moment when I had just figured out this information in my brain within kind of a 48-hour period where I was physically laying in bed sobbing, but I felt safe. And I felt like I had like a vision, like a coming, like I felt this release all while understanding all this information I was just downloading into my brain. It almost like something of the Fifth Element, when it's all downloading, and I felt like somebody was with me.
Yep.
And it
You
was
messaged me around this time.
because I was freaking out. I was like, who do I call? Like, what do I do? What am I hearing? Like, what is this that I just like know all of the sudden? And I had been so numbed out that suddenly it was like right there for me. And it was helping me process. And it, I'll get specific with it. It always feels like I have two lights up in the left-hand corner. And
I love that.
I identify those as my spirit guides. But at the time, there was no doubt in my mind that I was being helped, that they had been waiting for this. Somebody had been trying to get my attention.
You mentioned your grandmother and just continuing to get these visions of her in her chair, just like smiling this knowing smile, like, well done, welcome,
Well, no, not well done, welcome. No, she was sitting in her chair, in her rocking chair, and she was rocking back and forth. Yeah. And I had already quit drinking at this point, but what she did is she said, come here, let me take a look at you. Kind of did one of these with the chin, and she backhanded me. Quit.
Okay, that I don't remember.
We're going to ruin your life. She just told me everything right then. Like you're destroying everything. Like you're doing exactly what I did. You're destroying it all. But that was her. She was rough. She was tough. She was funny. But her being calm and like cool and collected like that probably wouldn't have gotten my attention. I needed to be backhanded.
You needed,
That's what happened. That's what I needed. I needed to feel that. And I had already quit drinking at that point.
But it was like that reminder to punctuate that sentence of like, don't do it again. Stay away from it.
You're repeating. Done. You're going to repeat the cycle because you're doing what everything else. It was just so clear as day. And I would feel her everywhere. She was such a boozer. She was such a boozer. Because she didn't know how to cope. That's, what happened.
Well, then here's to, I won't cheers because that feels ironically terrible. But here's to being cycle breakers then.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Breaking
I like
that cycle.
I don't know if I mentioned this, but You know how we were talking about alcohol being indoctrinated so much into our society?
Yes.
I used alcohol to celebrate every emotion I had. So if I was happy, let's drink. If I was sad, let's drink. If it was funny, let's drink. If I'm any
If
emotion,
you're bored, let's drink. Right.
any emotion I had was accompanied by a drink. I could never just experience it. Unless it was terror or suffering or things like that. That I could experience because I was conditioned.
Right. And the
tidbit.
terrifying thing about that too is socially, that's so much harder to notice because that's just what's accepted. That's just what we do as a society is, you know, it's a birthday, it's a holiday. It's, you know, right now we're in the, you know, the Christmas, Hanukkah, Thanksgiving, etc., New Year's season. And there's, you know, everything revolves this time of year around alcohol. It's also cold, so let's drink, to your point. So do you and again, we're not professionals, we're just people out here doing our best, but if you have any words of encouragement or wisdom for people listening who maybe are on that fence, what would you say, just to put you on the spot a little bit?
I would say you're not alone. You're not alone. And you can do it. That's the thing. It's like, what do you have to lose? If not now, when?
True.
When are you going to love yourself enough? When are you going to be enough?
Hint, it's right now. Right now.
Yeah,
totally. Right now. Why not?
Most of the time.
Let's just do it.
Yeah, it's just about, not being alone and figuring out you can live your life totally sober and be happy and be immersed in it and not have this thing constantly around. You know, I will say on another positive note is that nearly my whole family's sober.
What?
My mom quit drinking when I quit drinking. My husband quit drinking. My dad, my stepmom, they're sober. They quit drinking. My best friend Corbin, she doesn't drink either. My girlfriend Hope, she doesn't drink. So it was spreading, and it wasn't just because of me. They were going through their own things, right? But it was spreading.
Cycle breaking, man.
Hell yeah.
Damn. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I absolutely love and adore you. And I thank you so much for coming on here and talking to me and sharing all of that, not just with me, but with everybody that's watching and listening. For those of you listening, then, I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences. I mean, can you relate to what we talked about today? And if so, how? Have you had similar experiences? I want to know about them. So let us know in the comments. I mean, this is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, pretty much anywhere we can put it. You can listen to podcasts. That's where this is. So drop some comments. You can also shoot us an email. And I say us, I actually mean like me and the Addiction Help organization. Lights of Recovery at addictionhelp.com is the email address. And that's also where you can send an email if you want to be amazing, like Jess and like Ashley from previous episode, and come share your story. Because listen, everyone's got one. Everybody has a story, I'm convinced. And they don't all look the same. They may not all have the same intensities, but guaranteed you have a story and I want to talk to you. So shoot me an email and come on the show. If you liked this, help us get it out to other people by, I know this is so lame, everybody like and subscribe, but really like that shows the algorithm robots, hey, people like this. And the more people that watch this, the more people can be inspired and get help. I'm not trying to sell anything, man. I just want to help people. Help us help people. So like and share, comment, whatever, that helps get the message out. And then finally, don't forget to go to addictionhelp.com because that website is focused on actually helping people and giving information about addiction recovery. So all of that said, I Love you guys. I appreciate you checking out the show. Thank you again so much to Jessica. I'm sorry if I called you Jess a few times. It's old habits die hard, man.
You're allowed to call me whatever you want.
All right. Thanks and goodbye.